Hello. I met Lisa on a late summer evening at a friend's barbecue. The air was warm, carrying the smell of grilled meat and the distant hum of cicadas. I hadn't planned on staying long, but then I saw her. She was laughing at something, her head tilted back just enough to let the light catch in her green eyes. She wasn't trying to be the center of attention, but something about her naturally pulled people in. I wasn't the only one who noticed her, but I was the one who found a reason to sit beside her, ask her name, and start a conversation. Lisa had a way of making you feel like you'd known her forever. She was easy to talk to, quick-witted but kind, and her laugh was the kind you wanted to hear again and again. We talked for hours that night, long after most people had started heading home. She told me about her love for photography, how she dreamed of traveling and capturing the world through her lens. I told her about my job in finance, how I wasn't passionate about it, but liked the stability. We were different in so many ways, but somehow, that made it even better. Our first date was a week later, coffee at a small cafe downtown. I remember how she stirred her drink absent-mindedly, while telling me about the time she got lost in Italy with nothing but a paper map and broken Italian. I could have listened to her talk for hours. Things moved fast after that. Within 6 months, we were practically inseparable. She introduced me to her family, a warm, lively bunch who welcomed me with open arms. I took her to meet my parents, who instantly adored her. She had that effect on people. She made them feel special, seen. A year and a half after we met, I proposed. It wasn't anything extravagant, just the two of us on a quiet beach at sunset, the waves rolling in as I got down on one knee. Lisa cried before I even finished asking, nodding furiously before throwing her arms around me. That moment, I thought, was the happiest I'd ever be. Our wedding was small but perfect. We didn't need anything fancy, just the people we loved and the promise of a lifetime together. When I looked at her that day, I knew with absolute certainty that I was marrying the love of my life. And for years, life was exactly what I had hoped it would be. Marriage suited us. From the moment Lisa and I said our vows, life seemed to settle into something steady and warm, like the comforting hum of a favorite song. We bought a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a cozy 2-story place with a big backyard and a wraparound porch. Lisa loved the idea of having a garden, though neither of us knew the first thing about plants. Still, every spring, she'd drag me to the nursery, picking out flowers and herbs with boundless enthusiasm. More often than not, they didn't survive past summer, but it never stopped her from trying again the next year. I worked in finance, a stable job that kept me busy but provided us with the kind of life we had dreamed of. Lisa, on the other hand, had turned her passion for photography into a full-time career. She worked mostly as a freelancer, weddings, portraits, the occasional travel gig. She was talented, and I was endlessly proud of her. Sometimes, I'd come home to find her editing photos late into the night, her face illuminated by the glow of her laptop, lost in her own little world. We had our routines. Saturday mornings were for sleeping in, slow breakfasts with too much coffee, and flipping through the newspaper even though we both got our news from our phones. Sundays were for long drives with no destination, just the two of us and whatever road stretched ahead. We talked about kids. It wasn't an urgent thing, but we knew we wanted them eventually. Lisa wanted two, maybe a boy and a girl, though she joked she'd be just as happy with a house full of dogs. I imagined her as a mother and knew she'd be amazing at it. It was just a matter of time, of finding the right moment to take that next step. Looking back, those years felt effortless. We laughed often, fought rarely, and always found our way back to each other when life got stressful. If there were cracks in our foundation, I didn't see them. If anything was missing, I never noticed. Because back then, I still believed in forever. The years passed in a blur of ordinary moments, the kind you don't realize are precious until they're memories. Life with Lisa was good. We had built something solid, something that felt unshakable. Lisa's photography business took off, and with it came more travel. At first, it was just short trips, a weekend wedding in another state, a week photographing a destination elopement. But as her reputation grew, so did the opportunities. She started taking on more ambitious projects, traveling overseas for work. I was proud of her, even when it meant spending more nights alone than I would have liked. I kept busy with my own work. My job wasn't exciting, but it was steady, and I liked knowing that I was providing for us. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had a nice house, 2 cars, and enough savings to take vacations when we wanted. Every year, we planned a big trip: Paris, Santorini, Kyoto, places Lisa wanted to capture through her lens. I didn't mind playing the role of her assistant, carrying her bags while she chased the perfect shot. Seeing her in her element, so passionate and alive, made it all worth it. At home, our life was simple. We had a small circle of friends, the kind you could call up on a random Tuesday for drinks or a last-minute dinner. Lisa was the social one, always pulling me into plans I wouldn't have made myself: concerts, game nights, hiking trips. She had a way of making life feel fuller, of drawing me out of my own head. We still talked about kids, but we kept pushing the conversation down the road. Just a few more years, we'd say. Lisa wanted to focus on her career a little longer, and I wanted to make sure we were financially ready. It never felt like we were putting it off, just waiting for the right time. Looking back, I see now that life had already started shifting beneath my feet. But at the time, I was content. I thought we were happy. And maybe we were, at least, for a little while longer. It started with small things. The kind of things you'd normally brush off, except they started adding up. Lisa had always been busy with work, but lately, it felt different. She was traveling more than ever, sometimes for jobs she barely mentioned in advance. A wedding in Chicago, a last-minute engagement shoot in Miami, she'd tell me in passing, sometimes just a day or two before she left. Another trip? I asked one evening as she packed her suitcase. It's a great opportunity, she said, folding a dress and setting it neatly in her bag. I wasn't planning on taking it, but the client insisted. She smiled at me, but something about it felt rehearsed. I told myself I was imagining it. Then there were the late nights. Lisa had always worked odd hours, but lately, she was glued to her phone more than usual. I'd catch her typing away with a small smile on her face, only for her expression to shift the moment she noticed me watching. "Who's that?" I asked once, nodding at her phone. She hesitated, just for a second. "Just Aaron." Aaron was her closest friend, so I had no reason to question it. But something about the way she said it stuck with me. The biggest red flag came on a night when she thought I was asleep. I had gone to bed early, exhausted from work, but I woke up in the middle of the night and reached for Lisa. Her side of the bed was empty. Frowning, I got up and walked toward the living room. The glow of her phone lit up her face as she sat curled up on the couch. She was typing quickly, her expression soft in a way that sent a strange feeling twisting in my gut. "Lisa." She jumped, locking her phone instantly. "You scared me," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "I couldn't sleep, so I came out here." I nodded slowly. "Who were you texting?" She stretched and let out a fake yawn. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." I did. But I also knew Lisa. And something about the way she avoided my gaze made my stomach tighten. I told myself not to overthink it. We had been together for years. Lisa loved me. I had no reason to believe otherwise. But for the first time in our marriage, I felt something creeping in. A quiet, unsettling doubt. And once doubt takes root, it doesn't take long for it to grow. Lisa's pregnancy should have been the happiest moment of our lives. When she told me, I felt the world shift beneath my feet, not in fear, but in awe. We had talked about this for years, always pushing the conversation down the road, but now it was happening. I was going to be a father. I remember the way she smiled when she told me. It wasn't the wide, unrestrained joy I had imagined, but a softer, more hesitant smile. At the time, I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe she was nervous, unsure of what motherhood would bring. I didn't question it. I just pulled her into my arms, held her close, and whispered that we were going to be okay. But looking back now, I see it. The way she avoided my eyes, how her hands fidgeted as she spoke. She was hiding something even then. I just didn't want to see it. For a while, things seemed better. Or maybe I just convinced myself they were. Lisa was home more, cutting back on travel as the pregnancy progressed. She still worked, but she was more present. We went to doctor's appointments together, picked out baby clothes, painted the nursery a soft gray. I told myself the distance between us had been temporary, a phase we were now moving past. I told myself the late nights, the secretive texts, the half-truths were all in my head. After all, she was carrying my child. What reason could I possibly have to doubt her? But as the months went on, the cracks in our marriage didn't seal over. If anything, they grew. Lisa was distant in a way I couldn't quite explain. She went through the motions, smiling when she was supposed to, holding my hand during ultrasounds, but there was something missing. An emptiness in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. I tried to brush it off as hormones, stress, the weight of impending parenthood. But deep down, that creeping doubt never left me. Then there were the moments that didn't make sense. Like when I found her crying in the nursery one evening, staring down at the tiny onesies we had just folded. "What's wrong?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She shook her head quickly, wiping at her eyes. "Nothing. Just overwhelmed, I guess." I tried to comfort her, but she pulled away just enough for me to notice. Then there was the time I answered her phone by accident when she left it on the counter. She had been in the shower, and I didn't think twice when I saw an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. "Hello," I answered. A long silence. Then, a male voice, low, hesitant. "Lisa." My blood ran cold. "This is her husband," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "Who is this?" The call disconnected before I got an answer. I stood there, staring at the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. Lisa came into the kitchen minutes later, her hair damp, wearing one of my old t-shirts over her growing belly. She took one look at my face and froze. "Who was it?" she asked, too carefully. "I don't know," I said slowly. They hung up. She exhaled too quickly, like she had been holding her breath. Probably a wrong number. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. So I let it go. Because she was my wife. Because she was pregnant. Because the idea of doubting her, truly doubting her, was too much to bear. But I felt it. The unraveling. I just didn't know yet how much worse it was going to get. The day Lisa went into labor was a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, excitement, exhaustion. It all blurred together as I rushed her to the hospital, gripping her hand as she winced through contractions. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times before, pictured myself pacing in a hospital room, waiting anxiously to hold my child for the first time. And for a while, in the chaos of it all, I forgot about the doubts. The labor was long, but Lisa was strong. I stayed by her side, whispering reassurances, wiping the sweat from her forehead. When our baby finally arrived, I felt a rush of emotion so powerful it nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. The doctor placed the tiny, wriggling newborn in Lisa's arms, and I stared down in awe. "She's beautiful," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Lisa was crying, but they weren't the happy tears I expected. There was something else there, something raw and conflicted. I told myself it was just exhaustion, hormones, the overwhelming nature of it all. But then I looked at our daughter, and something didn't feel right. Her features were soft and delicate, but something about them gnawed at the back of my mind. Her hair was dark, darker than either of ours. Her skin tone was slightly different, just enough to make me pause. I shook the thoughts away. Stop it. She was just a newborn. Babies change. They grow into their features. And Lisa had just gone through hell bringing her into the world. This wasn't the time for doubt. For the first few days, I convinced myself that everything was perfect. I held my daughter, rocked her in my arms, and let myself believe that this was the family I had always dreamed of. But that nagging feeling never went away. Lisa was different. She barely looked at me when she spoke, flinched slightly whenever I touched her. She was distant in a way that went beyond postpartum exhaustion. And then there were the hushed phone calls when she thought I was asleep. The way she'd step out of the room, whispering into the receiver, only to pretend nothing had happened when I asked. Doubt settled deep in my bones, coiling around my chest like a vice. I needed answers. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I ordered a paternity test. I told myself I was doing it for peace of mind. That I just needed confirmation so I could finally silence the ugly voice in my head. But deep down, I already knew. The moment the test kit arrived, I felt like I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from. I waited until Lisa was asleep before swabbing our daughter's tiny mouth, my hands trembling as I sealed the sample. I did my own next, barely able to look at myself in the mirror. It took a week for the results to come back. A week of pretending everything was normal, of forcing myself to smile when Lisa handed me our daughter, of playing the part of a doting father while something inside me rotted away. When the email finally arrived, my stomach twisted into knots. I opened it. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the words, my vision blurring, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. I read it again, and again, but the numbers didn't change. She wasn't mine. My world cracked open, everything I had believed about my marriage, about my life, shattering in an instant. The weight of betrayal hit me like a tidal wave. I thought back to every moment, every lie, every late night, every time I had looked into my wife's eyes and ignored the unease in my gut. I was a fool. I clenched my fists, rage bubbling under my skin, but more than anything, I felt hollow. Like something inside me had been scooped out, leaving nothing but a gaping void. Lisa walked into the room then, cradling the baby in her arms. Not my baby. She smiled, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been lying to my face for nearly a year. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a betrayal carefully woven into the fabric of my life. I looked at her, my voice deathly calm. We need to talk. Lisa blinked, her smile faltering as she took in the expression on my face. I could feel the anger pulsing through my veins, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. For the past year, she had lied to me. She had looked me in the eye, shared a bed with me, let me believe I was going to be a father, all while knowing the truth. And now, the truth was staring me in the face. Cold. Unforgiving. Final. Lisa shifted the baby in her arms, her expression guarded. What is it? I exhaled slowly, my entire body trembling with restraint. Not here. Not in front of the child. I wasn't a monster, no matter how much rage burned inside me. Put her down, I said, my voice eerily calm. We need to talk. Alone. Lisa hesitated, clutching the baby tighter. Why are you looking at me like that? I couldn't answer. I was afraid of what I might say, of what I might do if I let my emotions take control. She must have sensed something was terribly wrong, because she finally turned and placed the baby in her bassinet. When she faced me again, her arms were crossed, her posture defensive. What's going on? She asked. I pulled my phone from my pocket and wordlessly turned the screen toward her. The email. The proof. The sentence that destroyed our marriage in one simple line. Probability of paternity, 0%. Lisa's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Guilty. She was guilty, and we both knew it. I took a slow step forward. Whose is it? I asked, my voice barely more than a growl. She shook her head, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I don't know what you... Don't. Lie. To me. She flinched at the venom in my voice, tears welling in her eyes. Please, just let me explain. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Explain? Explain what? That you let me believe this child was mine? That you stood in front of me, carrying his baby, while I promised to love and protect you? That you let me name a child that isn't even mine? Lisa sobbed, covering her mouth with her hands. I never meant for this to happen. That sentence. I snapped. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh, my fist clenching at my sides. You never meant for this to happen? Oh, really? So, what happened, Lisa? You tripped and fell onto another man's dick. She gasped, recoiling as if I had struck her. Good. Let it hurt. Let her feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. But I wasn't done. I stepped closer, towering over her, forcing her to meet my gaze. You cheated. You lied. And then, you let me believe this baby was mine. You let me dream of a future that was never real. Lisa was full-on sobbing now, her shoulders shaking violently. He didn't mean anything. I never wanted to hurt you, I swear. I exhaled sharply, stepping back. You didn't want to hurt me? My voice was deadly quiet. Then why did you do it? She was silent. I nodded, the final nail in the coffin sealing shut. That's what I thought. Then, I turned on my heel and walked away. Lisa followed me into the bedroom, her voice frantic. Please, let's just talk about this. We can work through it. I threw open the closet door and pulled out a suitcase. She froze. What are you doing? I turned to her, my eyes burning with betrayal. I'm packing. For you. She shook her head, panic setting in. No, you can't just throw me out. I didn't say another word. I grabbed her clothes, her shoes, anything that belonged to her, and started tossing them into the suitcase. My movements were sharp, fueled by adrenaline. I was done. So fucking done. Lisa tried to grab my wrist, but I shook her off. Please, don't do this. We can fix this. I zipped up the suitcase and shoved it into her arms. There's nothing left to fix. She sobbed. What about the baby? That stopped me. I turned slowly, my voice empty. What about her? Lisa wiped at her tears. She needs you. Something inside me snapped. She is not my daughter. I roared, my voice shaking the walls. Lisa gasped, stepping back like I had struck her. I took a deep breath, regaining control. I don't owe you anything. I don't owe her anything. Lisa shook her head wildly. You can't just leave us. I'm not leaving. I stepped closer, my next words hitting like a sledgehammer. You are. Before she could argue, I grabbed my phone and dialed a number. She watched in horror as I pressed the speaker button. Hello, came the voice of my lawyer. Lisa choked on a sob. Oh my God. I met her eyes, my voice cold and final. I need divorce papers drawn up. Now. Lisa collapsed onto the bed, her hands gripping the suitcase as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was streaked with tears, her body shaking as she gasped for breath between sobs. But I felt nothing. Not pity, not sadness, not regret. I had spent years loving this woman, giving her everything, trusting her without question. And for what? So she could make me a fool? So she could carry another man's child under my roof and expect me to raise it like my own? No. I had already lost too much. I wouldn't lose anything else. Lisa looked up at me, her voice weak and pleading. Please, we can work something out. I know I messed up, but don't do this. Don't just throw me away like I meant nothing. I let out a bitter chuckle, shaking my head. You meant everything to me, Lisa. That's the problem. You took my love, my trust, and you burned it to the ground. You don't get to beg now. You don't get to cry and act like this was some accident. Her lips trembled. It wasn't like that. I clenched my jaw, barely keeping my rage in check. Then tell me, what was it like? I took a step closer, watching as she flinched. Did you love him? Lisa swallowed hard, fresh tears slipping down her cheeks. No. It was stupid. I don't even know why I scoffed. You don't know why? I threw my hands in the air. Jesus Christ, Lisa. If you don't even know why you did it, what does that say about you? About us? You had a husband who loved you, who would have done anything for you, and you still fucked someone else. And then, you got pregnant, and you let me believe she was mine. You stood there and watched me dream about our future. You let me pick out names. You let me talk about fatherhood while knowing the whole time that I was living a lie. She broke then, her sobs turning into desperate, breathless cries. I was scared, she admitted, gripping the sheets like she was afraid I would rip them away too. I didn't know how to tell you, and then it was too late, and I thought maybe we could just move past it. Maybe she could still, I slammed my fist against the dresser, making her jump. She is not mine. She never was. And you knew that. But you still let me fall in love with her. Lisa buried her face in her hands, rocking slightly as she tried to control her breathing. I had never seen her so broken. A part of me, the part that had spent years loving her, wanted to comfort her. But that part of me was dead. She had killed at the moment she let another man put a child in her and decided to let me take responsibility for it. I turned away from her, my voice flat. You have an hour to pack the rest of your things. She lifted her head in horror. You can't be serious. I grabbed the keys to the car I had bought for her, twirling them between my fingers before tossing them onto the dresser. I'll be taking that back too. Her eyes widened. You gave that to me. I let out a humorless laugh. And now I'm taking it away. Just like you took away my family, my future, and my peace of mind. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. And the house? The house stays mine. I took out a loan for this place, and guess who's going to be stuck paying it off? You. She looked like she might throw up. But no, I cut her off sharply. No more excuses. No more tears. No more you. She sat there, frozen, as if finally realizing that this was real. That I wasn't bluffing, that there was no last-minute forgiveness, no reconciliation. That her lies had cost her everything. I watched as she slowly stood, her shoulders slumped, her body shaking. She dragged the suitcase off the bed, her fingers curling around the handle like she wanted to rip it apart. She looked at me one last time, searching my face for something, some sign of mercy, some flicker of love. She found nothing. Lisa sniffled, wiping at her eyes. I never wanted this, she whispered. I nodded, my face blank. Neither did I. And with that, I turned my back on her for the last time. Lisa stood in the doorway, her suitcase by her side, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. There was a time when I would have given anything to take her pain away. A time when I thought her sadness was my sadness, that if she suffered, I suffered too. But that time was gone. She had made her choice long before this moment. Long before the paternity test. Long before the late-night whispers and the distant gazes. The moment she let another man into her life, into our life, was the moment she chose this ending. And now, here we were. She mumbled one last apology before stepping out into the night, the door closing softly behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space she used to occupy, listening to the silence of a house that had once been filled with laughter, plans, and love. A house that wasn't home anymore. I exhaled, slow and steady. Then, I turned off the lights and walked away. The months that followed weren't easy. Grief has a strange way of clinging to you, even when you know you're better off without the person who caused it. I had to unlearn habits I had built over years, reaching for my phone to text her, instinctively checking for her car in the driveway, expecting her laughter in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. But little by little, the weight lifted. I sold the house. There were too many ghosts in it, too many memories that felt like salt in an open wound. Instead, I rented a small place in the city, something temporary while I figured out my next move. It was strange at first, waking up in an unfamiliar bedroom, drinking coffee at a kitchen table that had never heard an argument or a whispered, "I love you." But with time, it became mine. A space untainted by the past. Work became a refuge. I threw myself into my career, not out of avoidance, but because for the first time in a long time, I was working toward my future, not ours. I reconnected with old friends, the ones I had slowly drifted from in the comfort of married life. Some of them had seen the signs long before I had. Others were just happy to have me back. And then, there was travel. Lisa had always been the one with the wanderlust, dragging me along on adventures she wanted to capture through her lens. But now, it was my turn. I booked a trip on a whim, a 2-week getaway to Europe, just me, a backpack, and no itinerary. For the first time in years, I felt free. Healing isn't linear. There were days when I felt invincible, like I had come out of the fire stronger than ever. And there were nights when the loneliness hit hard, when I questioned everything, how I had missed the signs, why she hadn't just told me the truth, if I would ever be able to trust someone again. But then, I remembered, I was healing. The fact that I could ask those questions, confront the pain head-on, meant that I was moving forward. Lisa reached out a few times. The first was a long, rambling email filled with apologies, explanations, and regrets. I never responded. What was there to say? That I forgave her? Maybe, in time, I would. But not for her sake, for mine. Because I didn't want to carry that bitterness with me into whatever came next. I saw her once, months later, by accident. She was sitting outside a cafe, alone, staring down at her coffee like it held the answers to the mess she had made. She looked up, and for a moment, our eyes met. I expected to feel something, anger, sadness, maybe even longing. But all I felt was nothing. I nodded politely and kept walking. A year later, my life looks nothing like it did before. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm no longer the man who blindly trusted, who mistook familiarity for security, who ignored the gnawing feeling in his gut that something was wrong. I'm stronger now, wiser, and most importantly, I'm happy. Not the kind of happiness that comes from another person, but the kind that comes from knowing I survived. I rebuilt. I let go. And whatever comes next, I'm ready. Bye-bye.